Yo, what is up? It is your boys Zether back with part 2 to What If Deku Was the Joker. Now, obviously, you guys have actually hit the like goal, and this series, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this is one of my favorite series that I've ever had the pleasure to make. I'm super excited to bring you guys the next upcoming parts, and trust me, this one is going to be a slapper. Now, with that being said, let's get into the recap and into this amazing story. Now, in the last part, we basically went over Izuku's origin. How he was traumatized by Bakugo. His mother didn't take care of him. His father killed his mother. And the man she was doing things with behind Asashi's back also ended up killing himself. How he ended up meeting Harley and how he blew up the orphanage and was actually teleported away to the League of Villains after another year of being known as the Clown Prince of Crime. And with that being said, let's get into the story. Now, when Deku was teleported away, he was inside the bar of the League of Villains. As soon as he stepped in, he started laughing sadistically and said, "This is too perfect. You let me escape scot-free. Now what can I do for you, handyman?" as he looks at Shigaraki, who slightly is creeped out by Deku. Shigaraki then looks at him and says, "Well, I want your help to destroy All Might, the symbol of peace, the thing that keeps people like me and you away." Deku then has a creepy smile on his face and says, "No, no, 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 no. We aren't the same at all, but I'll hear what you have to say," as he laughs. Shigaraki will then say, "What would you say if I told you I have the means to destroy All Might, as well as some hero brats?" To which Deku then starts listening a little closely and says, "Go on." Shigaraki will then say, "Well, that's about everything I can tell you for now, but you choose, are you in or out?" in a threatening tone, as Deku simply laughs and, kind of slaps his knee a little bit as he then looks at Shigaraki and says, "Of course, my friend, we both want the same thing, don't we now?" As he then proceeds to say, "You're gonna need a little of my men, won't you?" And Shigaraki has a creepy smile on his face as he tells Deku that would help a lot. He then begins to tell them the details of the USJ attack, how they're gonna use the Nomu to destroy All Might, and how he's gonna take some villains to take out some hero brats. Now Joker, or Deku, will actually start plotting and will actually make his own plans. Now, the day of the USJ arrives, and we're going to go ahead and switch to the perspective of UA. After all those years had passed, Bakugo never changed or even felt remorse for anything he had ever done to Deku. Some random student from Class 1B replaces Izuku, and the students are currently on their way to the USJ. Now, as usual, the hero Black Hole gives her speech on how anybody's quirk can actually be a danger and how they need to use it properly. And Aizawa, as well as the kids, will then proceed to go inside. This is when Kurogear will actually appear, as well as a multitude of villains appearing on all of the different USJ joints. Now, the portal will begin to open with Shigaraki and Deku stepping out of the same portal, with Deku laughing loudly, maniacally, and sadistically, saying, "Hello, my friends. Sorry for crashing your party on such an occasion, but I noticed I wasn't invited." Most of the students now begin to get terrified. I mean, they've heard of the thousands of crimes Deku has committed and how he's an insane, sadistic clown who wants nothing but chaos. Aizawa, after hearing this, tells 13 to take the kids away, but as usual, they all get teleported when Bakugo and Kirishima run into it and try to attack. Now, this is when Aizawa tries to rush at Deku, but before he can, the League of Villains goons all attack at Aizawa, forcing him to take them out. Now, Aizawa uses his quirk to take some of them out, and some of the mutation quirks will actually pose a little bit of a threat for him. In a couple of minutes, Aizawa will actually be fighting them, and as that's happening, Deku simply pulls out a sort of toy phone and begins to call his goons as he tells them, "Begin," over the phone. Onto the heroes' side, the kids. The kids were then teleported away, such as the Class 1B student, who was actually very weak, Asui, as well as Mineta. Now, on the boat would have actually been a couple of Deku's goons, who were actually everywhere. Now, Deku specifically told them to spray the kids with laughing gas, which they did, of course, and now only the weaker bunch of the students were sprayed, such as Sue, Mineta, the new student, Mina, the kid Koda, who can talk to animals, and others such as them. Students like Kirishima, Bakugo, Todoroki would not be caught by them, since they would actually handle them very easily. Now, after that, they couldn't stop laughing, and they all passed out with a creepy smile all over their face. As this happens, the goons call back, and he gets about 7 calls telling them that it was successful, but the rest were unsuccessful. Now, after this, Aizawa would have actually finally taken out some of the goons and finally began to rush Deku, trying to capture him, throwing his scarf at him, but Deku simply dodged and started remarking as he laughed as he was fighting and elbowing Aizawa in the face, dodging all of his blows. Aizawa tried to cancel his quirk, but realized he didn't have one, and that's what scared him the most. Joker has no quirk? But he managed to cause this much destruction? This whole time, the heroes had predicted that he had a laughing quirk, or maybe a genius quirk, maybe an intellectual quirk, but no, he had nothing. Now, they kept fighting as Deku was always one step ahead of Aizawa, and not gonna lie, he was beating this man's ass. Sorry, I had to switch up the tone a little bit. This is when Deku would pull out a crowbar and begin to hit Aizawa, sending him flying upwards into the air and on his back. After this, Deku would walk back onwards to Shigaraki, smiling and saying, "Why don't you let the Nomu have a go at Aizawa?" as he laughs with Shigaraki smiling. Now the Nomu will then attack, and basically the Nomu will proceed to do exactly what he had done to the original canon Aizawa. As usual, as this is happening, All Might would appear with an angry expression on his face, ready to rescue the heroes and his students. Aizawa would get rescued by Deku, by All Might actually, and Deku would begin to jump in excitement, saying, "All Might, I'm your biggest fan," with a creepy smile on his face as All Might was pissed off. All Might would then go in to punch him full force, but the Nomu would stop the blow. Deku would laugh as he say, "You were trying to kill me there, weren't you?" With All Might fighting the Nomu. Now the fight would actually go a little bit better than in canon, since this time All Might hasn't given up his quirk. Now, I'm just going to say it now. Later on, All Might will actually proceed to give the quirk to Mirio. And the fight would go a little to canon, with All Might taking him out with a lot more ease and having about 2 more minutes left of stamina left. Now, as Todoroki would obviously appear, with Bakugo helping him get free from the portal that would inevitably happen. Now, this is where things would begin to change. The second Deku would see Bakugo, he would have a desire to murder him. Things wouldn't click at first, but after staring at his hair, staring at his remarks, his expressions, the way he carries himself, it would click. He would begin to think in his head, Bakugo. He would then have a huge desire to murder him and would stare down at Bakugo, going in and rushing him, trying to take him down swiftly, dodging all of his explosions and making Bakugo extremely angry. But Deku would then spray some knockout gas on him and drag him back to Shigaraki. After this, All Might would then get the boost he needs after seeing his student get taken off, and would break out of the portal and finish out the Nomu. After this, he would stare down the villains, with Shigaraki being scared, saying, "It's not fair. It's not fair. They cheated." And Deku would then stand in front of Shigaraki with All Might, rushing him and punching him. This is when Deku would smile as he gets flung into the wall, and Deku would start laughing as All Might practically teleports in front of him from how fast he was moving. He would then go in for another punch, but Deku would move his head and then start laughing. He would then say, "All Might, I wouldn't do that. If I was you, those students were infected with laughing gas, and you know what happens when you don't treat it, All Might." All Might would then proceed to say they already have a cure, to which Deku would laugh and say, "Oh, but you don't have a cure for the new and deadlier gas. They'll die in the next hour unless they get the antidote." To which All Might makes a terrified expression, sort of the face that he made when All For One told him who Tomura Shigaraki was, as he looks at Deku's insane eyes and sees Deku's laugh in his face as he grabs All Might's terrified face and then says, "Now be a good boy and let us go, and you can have the antidote." All Might would then have to let Deku go, as Deku would walk back to Shigaraki, limping a little bit, but wouldn't be in too much pain. As soon as he gets there, he would feel perfectly fine, and he would then look at All Might and say, "Oh, and All Might, I'm taking this one with me." To which All Might would then get angry and stand up and say, "I won't allow that." Deku would then proceed to say, "Tick-tock, All Might. Time's running out. It's him or the kids. I'll be leaving the antidote in your trusting hands once we're gone." As this is happening, the heroes would arrive, with All Might holding a signal to let them know that they shouldn't attack, which means Shigaraki doesn't get shot by the hero snipe, and the League of Villains escapes, with Deku and Bakugo being with Deku and having Bakugo captive. Now this means that Deku would leave a note that tells him the exact coordinates of where he had left the cure for this new antidote. For this new laughing gas. Deku would then laugh crazily as Shigaraki would be kind of grateful to Deku since his escape plan was pretty much perfect. Deku would then smile and say, well, at least we now know All Might is declining. We now have a new approach to things, with Shigaraki and Deku laughing maniacally. Shigaraki would then ask about the boy, and Deku would say that's for him to know. He would leave some Joker talks into the villains and say, I'll see you around, bucko. A few hours would go by, and Bakugo would wake up in an abandoned warehouse with Deku in his face, sitting on a chair, as Bakugo would be trying to get free, not dropping his tough guy persona. This is when Deku would then begin to laugh sadistically and stare deep into Bakugo's soul. He would then begin to welcome Bakugo to his funhouse, as Bakugo would call him a sick bastard, and Deku would basically then say, but Kachan, you don't remember me? I'm your best buddy. Bakugo would then be thinking where he's heard that name, and would then proceed to have a horrified look at his face as he then recognizes the green hair. Deku would then reveal himself to Bakugo and begin telling him that after all those years of suffering, I was taken to an orphanage after my parents died. I lived an awful life, as you know, and it wasn't until I decided enough was enough that I decided to finally take on who I was really destined to be. Ever since then, I became the clown prince of crime and known as the Joker, and it was all thanks to you and my mother. All those years of torture you put me through, all the scars that you've left on my body, they're permanent, you know. I can't get rid of them. As he then begins to laugh sadistically and not stop. This is when Bakugo would actually have a horrified look on his face and begin to try to scream as he then tries to get out of the chair and try to break out. Now, this is when Deku would then begin to laugh maniacally as he breaks one of Bakugo's fingers and gets in his face and says, let's have one last dance, you and me, buddy. Laughing insanely as he begins to torture Bakugo and beat him with a crowbar in a Robin fashion, and begin to laugh as he asks, this is the little something you used to do to me, Bakugo. Remember? Remember? As he then hits him and says, does this hurt? And he smacks him as Bakugo goes, ugh! He then begins to smack him again as Bakugo proceeds to just scream, ah! Ah! And Deku simply just keeps smacking and smacking as blood begins to splatter everywhere. This continues for a couple of hours until Bakugo passes out. Deku would, of course, wake him up every single time he passed him out and continue the beatings, reminding him of how it feels to have it done to himself. Now Bakugo would begin to cry and scream as he was now a shell of his former self. He was nothing but a mere vegetable who felt no more pain. Deku would then decide he'd had enough and would set bombs that to explode in about an hour. Now at this moment, the heroes would actually have been searching for Bakugo and actually tracked him down. However, he was too far to get to. Now in a sort of Batman fashion, as All Might arrives, it was too late. Right as he was outside, the place blew up as All Might was 1 second too late, and Bakugo's body was the only thing that was left, with All Might in grief that he had left one of his students die. Kind of ironic. He died to an explosion. Oh my god. After this incident, the faith in the Hero Society would become a little shaky, and some of the kids in UA would actually drop out, not wanting to ever continue the hero course or ever encounter the Joker again. They were quite traumatized by his laugh and the amount of insanity that he carried with him. The kids were terrified of what they had witnessed, and none of them would ever wish to, some of them would never wish to go back. Now, that's where I'm going to be ending this second part, so what if Deku was the Joker? If you guys want the next part, I'm definitely going to be needing 20 likes for the next part. And with that being said, Zether,